All right, back again. Fantasy Football Podcast. Slightly delayed. I know that some of you were giving me a little hard time for not getting the podcast out in a couple of weeks. I would contend that the live from Miami, live from the Marlins game podcast was some of my finest work, and frankly makes up for a couple of missed weeks. If only you guys knew the painstaking level of preparation that went into that podcast. I was taking notes all throughout the first and second inning, and had to, had a couple of dry runs, a couple of practice runs, and then really only after that much careful preparation was ready to actually put something on wax. Starting with the fab pickups, from last week, actually from 2 weeks ago. Biggest expenditure was myself. I spent $21 on Jamison Clam Crowder and another $13 on Orleans Darkwa. Now, let me address the $13 on Orleans Darkwa. I beat Dan last week, and it was only because Orleans Darkwa scored a touchdown. And so, that $13 obviously directly contributed to a win, which was a great move, and I'm happy I did it. Now, the $21 on Jamison Crowder, the first week returns were a little short. There's no question about it. However, Cleveland has that vaunted defense, and so obviously, I wasn't expecting too much out of Crowder in the first week. But I would say that I'm probably guilty of getting a little hyped up, getting a little hyped on a player that had a couple of good games. That we'll see. Hopefully, I do think he's good, but yeah, $21 might have been a little extreme there. Additionally, Bootsy got Terrell Pryor for $14, which seems like a great buy. I wasn't particularly interested in him at the time because I was sort of swept up in Crowder, but that's probably going to be some money well spent considering he scored a touchdown last week, and he looks like he's kind of locked in as the number one in Cleveland, just sort of out of nowhere. And then additionally, this week, Bootsy got Wendell Smallwood for $11, which is, a pretty kind of a no-name pickup. But, Ryan Matthews is clearly hurt, and there's something wrong with him. So I think that Wendell Smallwood could end up being their starter and could be a pretty good back on a team that's sort of surprisingly very good. Also, Ariel picked up Tyler Eifert, who is now hurt again. Got hurt after Ariel picked him up. And Ariel had only dropped Jimmy Garoppolo for him, who we'll touch on a little bit later. But according to Ariel, was a high value keeper, so that's a surprising transaction there. And then lastly, I beat out Ben for Paxton Lynch. Ben is in the extreme QB scare zone this week due to buys. He's starting just Cody Kessler, I believe, which would be embarrassing as a second quarterback, and as a first quarterback is really unspeakable. I might drop Paxton Lynch, or who knows? I don't know. I'll just do my fancy. It's just that's what life is like when you're outside of the scare zone. All right, moving into Schaefer's favorite part of the podcast, the power rankings. As tradition dictates, we'll start at the back. Number 12, Billy Boris. Poor Billy. Before week one, he probably thought he kind of had it made. He had Carson Palmer, Cam Newton, both of the starting quarterbacks from last year's NFC title game. Pair them with some stalwarts and Julian Edelman and Michael Floyd, and wow, what a group. Little did Billy know that Palmer would age 20 years in one off season and kind of sink Michael Floyd as a result. Newton decided to get a head start on his CTE, and Julian Edelman would get more touches throwing the ball than he would catching it. So Billy's team is pretty offensively shitty, and there isn't really a single thing on his bench that would inspire any hope. Billy, I don't understand, why do you have Matt Flynn or Charkandrick West, and who's Tyler Boyd? Is that does someone fill in for Brad Kaya or something there? Billy, your team is miserable, and good luck the rest of the way. Number 11, Oaks. Oaks is in that kind of miserable territory where you can't really convince yourself to sell out, even though you kind of know you should. Andy got smoked last week by myself and Schaefer, and then actually even lost a close one to Bootsy, who we'll see coming up on this list pretty shortly. Jameis Winston peaked in week one. Todd Gurley has been kind of an albatross for Oaks so far. He does have Brady coming back, and he got a very solid game from Le'Veon Bell in his first game returning, so I'm sure Andy is out there on the West Coast kind of tricking himself into thinking that he's now a competitor. But unfortunately, Oaks, you're not, so sell out. Number 10, Bootsy. You could make the argument that Bootsy's in a tough division, or you could make the argument that his team is just miserable and sucks. And actually, those two are not mutually exclusive. You could really make both of those arguments. Bootsy's team just kind of stinks of disappointment, really, if you look at it. Odell Beckham Jr. has been, a major underperformer, and I'm just getting sick of all the media stories about him freaking out and all that. People are getting spoiled, but back in the day, every receiver was a crazy maniac diva that acted out and had emotional problems. That's what made him so good. And now I think they've gotten spoiled by Calvin Johnson and Larry Fitzgerald, and some of those guys who are a little bit more well adjusted. So I wouldn't worry too much about Odell Beckham, but he's been pretty terrible so far. Additionally, Bootsy's got Ryan Fitzpatrick, Brock Osweiler, Golden Tate, who have all been pretty painful to watch. He's made a couple of shrewd pickups actually recently in Zach Miller and Terrell Pryor, and then also Wendell Smallwood, who I mentioned earlier. So I wouldn't rule him out, but he needs to hit on a couple of those guys and needs some of his stinkers to turn it around. Number 9, big jump here, Schaefer. Just like that, he's kind of extradited himself from the bottom of the power rankings. He's 5-1 actually in the last 2 weeks, and honestly, his team has shown some promise. However, I forget if it was 2 or 3 of those wins came off the back of one play in the form of a Derek Johnson pick six, which you can't really count on. But still, 5-1 is 5-1. If you look at his squad, Zeke Elliott is a monster. He's probably the odds-on for the best keeper for 2017. His competition for best keeper 2017, Schaefer also has, and Will Fuller, who's been great. Schaefer's depth will be kind of tested. Gronk has been not himself. He's obviously been terrible so far, and you don't know if it's because of an injury or because of the quarterback situation. But Schaefer's quarterback situation, actually speaking of it, is kind of tenuous at worst. Or tenuous at best, I should say. Tannehill is miserable. Brian Hoyer has been solid, but he might not be the starter forever. Schaefer is, he's not out of the clown zone yet, but he's got a little something to be working with. All right, number 8, myself. I had an excellent week last week, just like I knew I would. And how did I know that I would? Because Blake Bortles was getting his swerve on out in foggy London town. As much pussy as he slays here in Central Florida, those British women must have a thing for Mortal Kombat because he's always just playing to the extreme out there. Whenever he touches down at Wembley, he's always killing it. So I knew he'd be good. I hope he can kind of keep momentum going. Unfortunately, he isn't a bye this week, however, which is trouble for me because I'm playing Denenberg and Carlson for supremacy of the division. And actually, I'm off to a bad start. The game last night, Larry Fitzgerald decided to pee on me on national TV. So that was a great way to start things off. I will need some big points from, obviously, my MVP, Clam Crowder, as well as Alshon, not Sammy Watkins, Jeffrey, in order to have a chance in this one. All right, number 7, Ariel. In a very Krausian move, Ariel spent the better part of 3 weeks trying to force people into trading for Jimmy Garoppolo, only to drop him. Ariel's team is very middling. He does have some great players in Aaron Rodgers and Melvin Gordon, obviously. He has some studs who have kind of underperformed so far in Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins. He's got some potential upside in Tyrell Williams and Eli Manning, but he's starting Cameron Artis-Payne, which is kind of too offensive for words. All right, number 6, Carlson. Carlson took a tough L from Kraus last week despite scoring 131 points, which normally is more than good enough to win in this league. And honestly, if not for that loss, he'd be tied with Denenberg on wins for the lead of whatever Lane Bryant is called now. His big claim to fame is having Luke Kuechly on his team, who just racks up 10 tackles every fucking game no matter what. He's also got Jerick McKinnon, who's kind of trending upwards, and a solid core wide receiver. So looks like Carlson is going to be a contender. Obviously needs to just roll Luke Kuechly out there every week and count as 10 to 15 points. Number 5, starting off the top 5, Kraus. He picked up 3 wins off the back of an all-time performance from Julio Jones last week. His team is kind of middle of the road, except for probably the best 2 players in fantasy, all of fantasy, I should say, Julio and Antonio Brown. He's got Terrence West, who could be paying some serious dividends now that he's the starter out there, and make up for Ryan Matthews, who's just kind of a human landfill at this point. All right, number 4, Denenberg. Denenberg has got some solid performances so far, no question about it. But his team is built around a lot of old and injury-prone players. It's if you look at it, it's a little shaky. I realize the irony in me saying that after Larry Fitz put like 20-plus points on me last night. But his number 1 quarterback is Andrew Luck, who has a pack of trained simple folk playing offensive line for him. And then his big stud position players are Forte and Larry Fitz. Forte, I think, just got hurt actually already last week. He's got LaShawn McCoy, who's been pretty solid, but is kind of one concussion away from going OJ on our asses, and he even plays in the Bills. So if I was Denenberg, I would be, kind of nervous about what the future might hold. That vague threat has nothing to do with the fact that he's in my division. All right, number three, Smith. Smith had high points last week and picked up 3 big wins. He had a huge game from Big Ben, but unlike Krause, he didn't stop with just one player. He also got massive output from DeMarco Murray and A.J. Green. He also got good points from Alex Smith and Kelvin Benjamin. So Smith's bench is kind of ugly if you look at it, but word out of Miami is that Arian Foster might be back soon. That is, unless, of course, a stop sign flies into his living room at 170 miles an hour and slices him in half. All right, number two, Ben. Ben is actually the highest scoring team in the league, believe it or not. He presumably won't be this week after the inevitable 65-point performance he has lined up with Cody Kessler as his number one quarterback against the Patriots defense. But so far so good for Ben. Looking at his team, it's not overly impressive, but he does have Greg Olsen and Marvin Jones, and then obviously the Isaiah Crowell. They've all been supreme. They've all been top 2 or 3, I believe, in their position group. So those players have been major hits for Ben. He did have 2 losses last week, but he got unlucky playing the top 2 scorers of the week. So really, with a little bit more luck, Ben actually probably could have been higher on this list. Speaking of higher on this list, number 1, I think the choice is obvious so far. It's coworker Dan. Coworker Dan, the man we let waltz into our beloved fantasy league and stomp all over us. It should be noted that Dan took a rough loss at the hands of me and Orleans Darkwell last week, but he's still a strong 10-2 with the second highest points in the league. Stafford and Ryan obviously have been amazing, and David Johnson has been great. And I actually wrote this before the game last night. David Johnson was a freak last night, and Dan is obviously on his way to 3 more victories this week. Dan actually also has been playing the Fab game pretty well. He's picked up Jordan Howard and Steve Smith, who have both been very solid contributors. So, Dan's team is great. There's really not much else I can say. It's not great enough to overcome Orleans Darkwa, but still pretty great. All right, time to open up the old mailbag. Let's see here. First question, Andrew Denenberg. Now that you live in Lake Bluff, 1, do you go to church? If so, how is that affecting your football Sundays? 2, do you mulch? 3, the silo is good. That's not a question, just a statement of fact. Off Lake Bluff and on to fantasy football for a minute. Have you ever seen the movie Flirting with Disaster? Basically, Ben Stiller travels the country to find his biological parents, only to find that they're meth cooks in New Mexico. Spoiler alert. If you swap Ben Stiller for Ariel and biological parents for a running back, and Bilal Powell for the meth part, I think you have yourself a sequel. Again, not really a question, but I welcome your thoughts on this or any other mid-90s comedies. And seriously, fuck Ariel for always outbidding me by like $1 or $2 on my handcuffs. Shit is so annoying. Love Andrew Denenberg. That's good, Denenberg. I'll kind of answer your questions. The first part first, obviously. I do not go to church here in Lake Bluff, although I do kind of feel myself surrounded by Christ love. In fact, actually, our home is a Jewish bastion of hope. As last week, my parents came over and gifted us with a mezuzah that we didn't ask for, and then proceeded to put it up immediately, which Michelle, of course, was thrilled with. I would say to your second question, no, I do not mulch. In fact, the Sucker Homeowners Association does all the landscaping for us. In fact, all I have to do is pay an exorbitant fee and really have no choice in the matter. So, joke's on them. The silo is great. You're obviously right there. I'm learning there is a number of exceptional options out here in Lake Bleezy. There's Denelli's, where they serve Poeta sausage. The Lake House, which is they do trivia there. Lake Bluff Brewery. There's all sorts of great stuff out here. And also you can walk around in the public streets drinking from open containers, and no one can stop you, or at least hasn't stopped me yet. Not quite sure what to make about your last point there. Frankly, and embarrassingly so, I'm unfamiliar with that film. I will, however, compare Ben's team to another 90s cult comedy classic, Dazed and Confused, in the sense that it's filled with a bunch of no-names who, for one shining moment, actually delivered the goods and smoke weed all the time. Speaking of Ben, the next mailbag question comes from Ben himself. Ben, number 1, lots of young wide receivers that were drafted cheap are looking good and keepable. Who do you like in terms of this year's performance and or capability out of Marvin Jones, Corey Coleman, Willie Snead, or Will Fuller? And question number 2, the new owners, Achia or Nish Nish? And then actually he says, why not do marry, fuck, kill, which fortunately I ignored when answering this question. All right, to the first part of the wide receivers you mentioned, I think Fuller has the most staying power. He's kind of that new style of wide receiver where it's not just his height that makes the difference, but also his kind of routes and cutting and speed. He's looked awesome, frankly, so far. It's been great. It's just sort of depressing that he is strapped onto Schaefer's Hindenburg of a team. Corey Coleman was looking pretty good, but Browns there. New owner so far has to be an Ahia. I mean, Carlson is in the thick of things in his division and competing. Schaefer has kind of weathered an early storm, and he's got that sweet, sweet clown exemption and knows how to use it. And then Dana's killing us all. However, old owners out of the balloon. All right, that's it for the fantasy football podcast this week. Good luck. I'm going to need it after what Larry Fitzgerald did to me, and go Giants.